If you've not had or heard a discussion about ESG over the past couple of years, you've probably been living on a tropical island. I'm Greg Thomas, and today we're going to discuss best practices for creating a finance-driven ESG strategy. And to do that, I'm joined by Doug Schosser, EVP and Chief Accounting Officer at KeyBank, and Philippa Lawrence, Workday's Chief Accounting Officer. Welcome to you both. Glad you're here.
Thank you.
Before we dive into the topic proper, I'd love it if you could each just briefly talk a little bit about yourself and your current role. And Doug, we'll start with you.
Absolutely. Thanks. It's great to be here, Greg. I have been at Key for about 25 years. I've had a variety of different positions, and I am currently our Controller and Chief Accounting Officer, and I am one of the members of our team at Key that is thinking through how we're going to manage, report, and goal on ESG strategies going forward. Welcome again. And Philippa?
Hi, I'm Philippa Lawrence. I'm the Chief Accounting Officer at Workday. I've been at Workday for 3 years. In my current role related to ESG, I'm the co-lead of our SteerCo with my friends in legal and internal audit. And we are currently carrying out a priority assessment to make sure that we're focused on the right ESG initiatives.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for being here. So, for any number of reasons, business leaders have been devoting more focus and more time to environmental, social, and governance issues. So I'd like to ask each of you, why do you think this is so important today, and why does the focus continue? Doug, again, we'll start with you.
I think for a long time, companies have talked about, impact to stakeholders, impact in their economy or in their local environments, their economies, cities, and states. And I think what ESG has helped do is bring that much more to the forefront and actually try to give some facts to those statements so that it's not just, we want to be a good corporate citizen, but now it's actually, and you can see proof points as to what we're doing in that regard.
Trying to put some definition around it.
Right.
So Philippa, adding on to what Doug said, what about the reporting side of things?
Well, it's interesting. It's really easy to get caught up in ESG reporting and forget why we're reporting. And so when you look at all the ESG programs, it's recognizing there's a shift. For the E, it's to improve the planet and protect the planet. For the S, it's to invest and help support the local communities better. And for the G, it's about creating a framework that's trusted.
Doug, what challenges do you see for companies who are trying to figure out how they navigate this disclosure landscape around ESG?
Yeah, the biggest thing that I look at is it's all so new. If I think about, 30 years ago when I was in college, we weren't talking about any of this. If I think about 5 years ago in business, it was just starting to be talked about. Now, all of a sudden, there's lots of proposed rules and complexities about reporting that have sort of gotten in front of where companies even are on understanding how to position themselves or their strategies. So I think what you're seeing is just a need to standardize so that you can compare companies more effectively to one another, but a great concern on our ability to collect data and be able to report data, particularly in things as serious as financial statements, which Philippa and I know all too well. Once things go into your financial statements, it's the real deal. Like, you have to have them right, you have to have them perfect, and neither one of us want to be in a position where the rules are changing as we're trying to develop systems and processes in order to measure them.
All right, so some clarity and consistency is pretty important there.
Yeah, and I think what is inferred with what you're saying is we don't necessarily have problems, or at least at Workday and presumably at KeyBank, we don't necessarily have problems around the S and the social side of things, your diversity metrics. It's really focused around the E and the environmental and getting our hands around the data that comes in to disclosures for environmental and climate-related issues is where I think a lot of accountants around the world are sitting back and going, okay, it used to be this aspirational goal with no controls around this data. But now we've got to go and wrap our arms around it, and we've got to stand by those numbers, and they're going to be audited, and so they better be right.
Yeah. The concept around having a tool like Workday, where we know everything we need to know about our employee bases, and we can easily report against it, makes the S so much less scary than the E, where all of a sudden we're talking about having to do things like measure 7 specific greenhouse gases, some of which I didn't even really know were gases. So it is an entirely different ballgame when you're talking about how do we grapple with climate risk and climate disclosures versus the disclosures around social activities, which both our firms are so passionate about anyway and have been for years. So that feels comfortable. The E side of it feels a little bit overwhelming at times.
Yeah, and then to lead on from that, there's a whole new vocabulary that goes along with the the E side of things that we're brand new to as well. And you not knowing all the greenhouse gases, I was struggling understanding the concept of greenhouse gases and dove in and started reading all about that. And there's this brand new, for the reporting side of things, this brand new alphabet soup of legislations and regulations, and they aren't harmonious with each other either. And new ones keep coming out, and it's actually kind of an interesting world to step into when we're used to the calm pace of accounting standards.
Yeah, and so much uncertainty and risk just in the macro environment, right? The world literally is changing, and so trying to figure out how you put some guardrails around that to be able to work with is non-trivial.
And this is the time, though, where it is going to take a village. It's going to take all of us working together. And it's great to have partners like Workday and PwC and others who help us think through how do you even get your arms around this massive new data set, this massive different taxonomy, and start to actually report it. But I think we'd both agree, if you don't report it, you're certainly not going to manage it. You're certainly not going to get better at it. So I think it is the right step to take. It's just, let's hope we take a step that we can manage as opposed to a step that is sort of overwhelming everybody. A tool that's as comprehensive as Workday, right? You can do planning, you can gather your data in Workday, you can put all the reporting together. That is going to be a big help in moving down this ESG path.
No moving data out and extracting and reloading. So let's bridge from there to how finance as a function, really looks to help with these ESG challenges. So, whether it's educating investors and other stakeholders, quantifying the value and perhaps the downside to ESG-related issues, allocating capital, making investments. So as controllers, how do you partner with the rest of the finance function and the larger business when you think about coming together on your ESG strategy?
I think where controllers have always been really good at our craft has been talking about or thinking through the way we're going to collect data and report data and have it be very consistent and very reliable. We create controls around that process so that we can be assured that the information that we're providing is actually the right information and we get it to people on a timely basis. That lays the foundation for all of this work. And then we have to partner. I think you said earlier you're partnering with legal and you're partnering with other parts of the firm.
Audit,
Right? So I think we build that bridge that helps people understand, okay, you tell me what you want to do. I'll help measure your progress both today and then sort of in the future so that you're at least locking into what are the facts. And I think that becomes really important in something like ESG because there can be lots of opinion, but hopefully there can only be one set of facts, and hopefully those facts help the company make the right decision.
Does that resonate with you, Philippa, sort of building that framework to help?
It does, and the controllership sits in a very different space to a lot of other departments in the company, and we do look at the world of the company holistically. We look at it holistically when we're reporting out, and this is no different. We'll be looking at this holistically, and we're used to looking and speaking to all the different partners within the company as well. And I think one of the very interesting things for this one, for me anyway, it goes back to that vocabulary and partnering with a new team that I hadn't partnered before with, which is our environmental sustainability team. Mm-hmm. And then being quite humble insofar as they've been doing this for years, they're completely savvy, and trying to understand what they've been doing. It's just, it's quite the stretch. We've got a lot of rapid learning and understanding to do. But I think we were talking earlier about how it's exciting to step into this new world for us and something a little bit different out of the world of accounting, yet using the skills that we bring to and that credibility around numbers. That when they go through our hands, they're trust, they're reliable, you can trust them, and we add credibility to everything goes by us.
People may not always think about accounting as being the most exciting field, but
It is.
But it is, right? Well, that partnership that you're describing, I mean, really learning what's fundamentally a very different part of the business and having to help, put those structures in place and understand what are you doing? What are your business requirements? How do we report on it? I think that's fascinating. And I think you must bring as controllers like a different perspective to this than maybe some of the other folks sitting around the table. So
you mentioned it about looking at investments. I've just been asked recently, we're looking at some other ESG, and let's face it, investments. And we were presented with numbers, the finance team were presented with numbers, and we didn't know where they came from or what they were. And so I've given it to my team and said, hey, let's do what we do. Let's understand the holistic view. Let's understand the opportunities and the benefits of doing this. And when we come back to the table, we'll be able to give options to management as to whether this is a good investment to make or not.
And I love that, because I think that's another thing that we as controllers bring to the table in this particular area is we're willing to ask the tough questions. I mean, if we see information, generally speaking, everybody that I know is in one of these roles will ask questions. Where did it come from? How do you know it's right? What have you done sort of to gather that information? Those become really helpful because a lot of times there's been a bit probably of underinvestment in reporting on ESG. There's been a lot of excitement about being able to create policies and statements around what your firm is doing, but I think there hasn't been as much of the kind of hardcore data gathering and information sort of expertise leveled against this because there's, let's face it, there's lots of priorities that companies are dealing with all the time.
And we haven't had to do it.
And we haven't had to do it. And I think now you're going to start to see kind of a different level of expertise lent to the measurement in an efficient way. And it's going to really help companies, I think, do a much better job on hitting those goals as opposed to simply making the statement. So it is an exciting space to be in.
So Philippa, talk about metrics. So how do you measure this stuff?
So at Workday, we use that very famous SMART acronym to make sure that our metrics are specific. They are measurable. They're achievable, but in a sort of push kind of way. They are, where am I up to? Reliable. And most importantly, they're time-bound. So Workday, having a diverse team has been one of the cornerstones of our successes. And so a few years ago, we issued some metrics to do with vibe that were really important to us. And for
Those
everybody,
are diversity and inclusion type metrics.
Yes, exactly. And one of the examples of this was for us to increase a representation of Black and Latinx workmates in the US by 30% by 2023. Time-bound and measurable and specific. We continue to measure those metrics to this day, and they remain extremely important to us at Workday.
So putting that structure around it is really important.
It's super important. Yeah. And the time-bound part, I think, is one of the most important parts of the
Because you don't have a goal. You have to have a goal, but you have to know when you want to achieve the goal.
You can't just say, I want to do this, but I have no idea when. It's not helpful.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that's kind of interesting, so we have a corporate sustainability council. They're really driving out the goals. And then we're really coming to the table trying to help them think about the measurement and how you do that. And what I really am excited about is being in front of it for once. There have been so many examples of when accounting is called in sort of after the fact to kind of figure out how do we make sense of whatever it is that we've done. I think it's nice when you're up front because you can take advantage of tools like Workday that have these vast capabilities of identifying non-financial goals and capturing that in a product like Prism, where you can actually use that later to drive all this reporting. So I think, taking off from the goal piece, which is super important to have goals that are measurable and understandable and time-bound, but then to say, and then have the reporting kind of capture those items very specifically, be able to roll them up in a reliable way and be able to report them is really sort of where you get the nice complement of all of these teams working together. Similar with diversity, right?
So to add on from what Doug has said, we have in the HCM tool something called Vibe Central, which would help me with my diversity metrics. It's your one-shop go-to place for all of your Vibe needs. And within that tool, you can see your targets and how well you're doing against your targets. And that's just straight out of Workday. It's got all those controls and business processes that are built in to Workday, so you can trust that data. And on top of that, I don't know if you have it, but we have Peakon, which is a interim see how you're doing type of tool.
A way to listen to employees.
Yes. And we have those questions that are issued every Friday and takes the pulse of the company. And so what you can do with that is you've got your target, you've got how you're doing, but just in that interim period, you can look at your responses from Peakon and just see how you're tracking to it. So there's a lot in Workday that can really help you measure and control and manage your Vibe goals.
Well, and imagine the controllers liking the data, right?
Oh, we love data.
Well, and also the nice thing with Workday is all this stuff is shared. Like Workday's so open with helping you understand how they use Peakon or how they use Vibe, and you can learn from each other. I think one of the great things about ESG, with all of the stress and pressure that it puts on us, it also gives us a chance to meet colleagues and do things differently. Yep. Like Philippa, you and I got together really largely as a result of ESG, right? Like it was a great partnership that we were able to forge. And, you do have to look at sort of the bright side and opportunities that these changes give you. So I think the learning is exciting. I think the partnering is exciting.
So that's a perfect tee up for our last question, which is when it comes to advancing ESG work, what best practices or tips would you share with folks who are also on the journey?
It's learning from peers. I think Doug hit that straight on the head. Actually, I think that might have been one of the first conversations we ever had was, hey, what are we going to do about ESG? And we had a really great conversation about it. But it's with a lot of other peers. We're all in the same boat trying to learn from each other. So I've done a lot of reading, delved into a lot of information I never thought I would have to read to really get up to speed. So when I am talking with the more savvy folks that have been doing it for years, at least I can understand a little bit about what they're saying. And I think, recognizing that we don't know everything, being humble about it, and being a sponge to everything that's going on is super important. And then helping everybody else come along, and our peers and our colleagues and our friends in the accounting community. Yep. And then the one last thing that I've done personally is take courses. So there's courses out there with certificates. There's a really interesting one that looks at educating board members on ESG that I found particularly interesting, and just learning. Because at the end of the day, we're stepping into something new, and we're stepping into something new that is very important for the world going forward. And I never thought I'd ever sit here as an accountant in my entire life and know that actually accountants can help save the planet. So we're just leaning in and doing our best.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the opportunity to interact with just different information is something that you don't always get, especially in accounting, which can be very rules-driven and be the same process you live through quarter after quarter after quarter if you're a publicly traded company. To have the opportunity to sort of flex different intellectual muscles, to have a reason to talk with a colleague in an entirely different industry and learn what are they doing on a topic like ESG so that you can get better ideas, to get the chance to go to conferences and be exposed to sort of leading edge design theory on something like ESG. It's all very interesting, and it is something that I think we have to just look at a lot of the positives of it. As much stress as there will be that will come from it, there will be a lot of good that comes out of it. And I think at the end of the day, to Philippa's very good point, we all know that this is a challenge for the world right now, and it's something that we can be a part of. And, we can leave a little bit of something behind for the next generation, which I think is really cool.
Such an important journey. Thank you both for being here. We've been talking today with Doug Schosser and Philippa Lawrence about ESG. I'm Greg Thomas. Thank you so much for watching.